2025, and it's 1:30 p.m., and we're here to discuss grants updates, and I will turn it over to Colleen.
Fantastic. So part of the conversation has been with the funding pause. That happened the end of January, and I've been kind of watching that. It's been kind of a hit or miss where it hit. We have certain programs that it has impacted, some it hasn't, some that their CFDA, CDF, that four-letter word, their federal listing number, is on that review list, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's on hold. It just means that it will be reviewed. There's been correspondence back and forth with several entities, state and local and federal, that have been trying to keep us updated on those, on whether or not they're on hold or proceed as normal or, stop everything altogether. So it's been a pretty mixed bag of that. I reached out to everybody that I knew had grants and tried to aggregate some of that so that we could kind of keep an eye on those and have a conversation as needed. So I'll just kind of go down the list of who I was able to get some information back. I asked some pointed questions about, the grants you have, the status they are, any correspondence that you've received, is it impacted, and how are your reimbursements going on that, if it's a reimbursement type grant. The roads, they have reached out to LATC, the LTAC. It doesn't seem to have any immediate impact, but she said at this time everything's obligated and they don't expect any delays, but any projects awarded and not yet obligated are stalled. There's significant FHWA funding that could be impacted, but they don't really have any updates on any of that just yet. So the roads is still kind of in limbo, figuring out where they are, and because there's a lot of federal funding that's coming down from that. In fire mitigation, there are 3 active and 3 submitted applications. So the Title III contracts are signed. There is 46.8 in obligated for contractual coming out for this next season. Okay, so 46,800 that's obligated to do fire mitigation next year. Shouldn't be impacted by that. There's a reimbursement out for 195,000. Let's see, Miller Way, 195,000. Still work to be done. That one is currently on hold. Miller Way 2. There's an MOU signed. That one's on hold. The WSFM is 240,000. That's a proposal that's been submitted. No update on that. There's a restoration for $500,000 that's been submitted, and the Community Wildfire Defense Grant for $7.5 million submitted. Those we'll just kind of have to see where this all lands out after they've reviewed the wording on any of the grants. And that's where I'm hearing every entity is they've gone back through and they've looked at what is the wording looking like, and they're trying to pull out very specific things that there were part of the order for OMB that says we're going to stop these because we're not doing this. So that's what they're figuring out is any of this in there, and how do we proceed forward. So that's kind of where anything new being submitted is being put on hold until they have a chance to review all of that information for those funding sources and what's the objective goals and what drives those, whether executive orders or legislation that drives those funding. The reimbursements, we're pretty well on track for fire mitigation things coming back in. The Miller's Way, that one is on hold right now. Typically what I'm finding, and correct me if I'm wrong on yours, but what I'm hearing from most everybody is if it was anything incurred previous to January 20th, everything's getting paid. If it's after January 20th, everything's being reviewed with a little more of a microscope approach to reimbursements for that. Even if the money is already in and obligated, they're still looking at reimbursements post January 20th.
So this would be actual work done on the ground before January 20th. Mm-hmm. So we should be good on everything we did last year.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in theory. Unless something weird comes up. There's still a lot of limbo on that, and I go back onto GFOA and the OMB sites and have been looking at that, and it's still just kind of there's a lot of court cases and a lot of you will and shall and mights, and so it's still a little bit of a limbo there. The Sheriff's Office has the STEP grant, which is a traffic control. They submit quarterly. First quarter submitted. That pays for 75% of deputies' wages while they're doing the STEP program, and that's some traffic intervention, some community outreach and education, a lot. It's a lot of what the deputies do, and it pays for 75% of that person who does it.
One deputy.
One deputy, yeah, Darius. Yeah. And the mobilization grant, that is apply as they do a mobilization. There are up to 7 a year that can be done. They have submitted for 2 that have been canceled so far. So that is being impacted in that when they go out and say, we want to do this mobilization scope of work, they're coming back and have had 2 of them say, no, we're not going to pay for those.
Now that's for the sheriff's office?
For the sheriff's office, yes. So it's a program that they basically apply for every mobilization as it comes up, as I understand it. And she sent me the contract, and that's kind of what it reads. That as that comes up and they have a project that they want to do, they submit it and then get approval to do it. So they're not out the money because they don't do the project unless they're approved to do that.
Okay.
As I understand it.
Now the 75% of the wage grant, can you say that again? Is that grant already been allocated and?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
They'll get it this year?
That was a grant signed as of October 1st. So it's this fiscal year, but It was signed October 1st. Its CFDA number is not on the OMB list for review.
Okay.
So it should not be impacted. And that mobilization, it pays for all overtime that is spent by deputies for those emphasis programs, and it's reimbursed by ITD. And then Dustin applies for those prior, and ITD sends back approvals. The prosecutor's office, the stop is the only one that they have right now. That was a continuation grant. It was already allocated. They are reviewing that, but there's the reply from ISP was go ahead and just go as normal. They're not seeing any issues and concerns with that. So they are looking at it, but it is not something that is expected to have any pauses or concerns for that program.
Okay, so it's funded through this year as well?
Correct, yeah.
So it's allocated.
This is one that you just do continuation grants for up to 4 years. So we received the initial approval for that grant. This is our 3rd continuation, so 2 years ago. So this is a continuation of an approved grant that they just allocate the money every year for it.
Okay.
So this is one that was already done. We were approved for our next continuation grant at the end of the year. So we should be good on all of that.
Okay.
And Flo's still working on finishing up the final for the previous year's continuation. So we haven't started the new year's yet. So they'll have this figured out by the time she gets going on that one.
Okay.
The airport, the FAA is moving forward. Helena ADO lost 60% of their staff because the cutbacks. The shortage has given an anticipation of delay of any grant awards for this year. Funding award is not anticipated to be impacted, but they won't know until the 18th is kind of where I'm hearing that line of we should have more word going post the 18th. So next week we should have a little bit more understanding of where these things are going. The county only has 1 awarded contract, and that's the one that we just had finished with going through the IFE and all of that to do those. There's little to no risk associated with any of the federal grant awards. The ones that you were going through this morning, there's little or no risk on that. There should be no risk because it's a BIL, the Infrastructure Act, and isn't through any of the other programs that are being evaluated. The funding should be allowed to move forward in the near future. It's just they're working at a massive staff shortage and trying to go through all of these processes there. So that should be, and then the perimeter fencing, that shouldn't be any problem, but it's not awarded yet. It's still under review, and that's a no match. Again, no risk on that at all. The planning and zoning has no federal funding. emergency services, there's FEMA funding, and they've been advised business as usual with expectation and delays for reimbursements. So they have just the 2 grants, the Emergency Management Program grant, the EMPG, that's 50% of Dan's wages. And there's, again, the advice is business as usual. The State Homeland Security Program, SHSP, that is different projects for like radios, first responders, LEOs. That's more for planning and interoperability through that. So again, there's no concerns or problems with that. There are a couple reimbursements out, but that, as I understand how those pass through, that doesn't impact the county because they're typically like paid for by the other entities. So yeah, again, I think we're good with that, and Dan doesn't expect any problems or issues with those. And then for the grants that I have are the LATCF, SLFRF, the Silver Express, the ILED. Those, there's no effect, no problems, no concerns, no questions, and no delays in any of the reimbursements. We sent one in for the bus, both the CARES and the other, and they were back in the usual time. The balcony project, which was a Department of Energy pass-through through the state, that was put on hold, so we awarded doing the doors, but I stopped to go out and do the window treatments because that was the concern, is that, that being an energy grant, they were really reviewing that. And so I just got word on Monday that we're good to go on it. So that one is no longer on hold.
The balcony is not, or the windows
Excuse me, the windows and the doors
are no longer on hold.
Correct.
But
yes.
the balcony is.
No, that one is, sorry, I misspoke on that. Yes, the balcony is through the city, and my conversations with SHPO is we're good to go on it because it's state money. And so no problems there. There's the RCIF, which is the Golden Chest. There's no effect. The GEM, which is the North Fork, no effect. And to my knowledge, the Broadband Technical, there's no effect, although there's some undercurrents with that as a whole, the broadband, because of words in it that are being pulled out, like the BEAD, that big, huge one, and the state got that $583 million. BEAD is broadband equity, access, and anyhow, there's words like equity and digital divides and inclusion that are in that aren't a part of the DEI, but it's just words that are being picked out, and so they're being scrutinized pretty heavily for those. So broadband is really being looked at on any front, as far as I can tell. My work with the consultant that's doing the BTA with me, she also works with other states and has been putting out fires in multiple other states because of that, where they've had projects already moving forward and had to immediately stop everything because they're really looking at the broadband expansion funding. Other than that, there was nothing else I really could find that was good, better, and different. I think we're in a pretty good place. I don't feel like there's anything that's going to be a fiscal impact for what we already have. There have been some other grants that they've pulled off the table. I had 4 or 5 others in my site that I was looking at and had enrolled in the webinars to figure out what those look like, and they pulled them off the table and are no longer offering them. So I see more of that as they're just going to kind of revamp everything. And that's, again, what I'm hearing from these entities is they've pulled all of their verbiage, all their contracts, all of their goals, and those words, those trigger words, they're evaluating, does this fit into any of the concerns that were brought up through this funding pause? And if so, then what is the true meaning of this? And do we just need to change the verbiage? That's kind of where the whole evaluation is on any of these programs, as I understand it today.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Going back to fire mitigation, I was trying to take notes and you were talking very quickly.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, could we get a copy of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah, no, you can have that. I've got it.
All of our reimbursements are okay because all of our work was done prior to January 20th?
Yes.
Okay. Are any of our opportunities for this year being hampered?
Right now, the only money that we can spend is out of Title III. And we got a little bit of money in there that we could probably do 2-3 small projects. But then after that, if we deplete that, then and no other grants come, we're done.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
And what about the IDL's grant that they were talking about?
Well, that PRRA grant, one for 500.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know because nobody's talking about it.
Okay.
One thing that I heard is, and I think it's coming out of state money.
Mm-hmm.
If it does, we'll get it probably May or June.
Okay. So that'll.
And then the rest of them, the CWDG grant, the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, that's federal. The other 2 grants that I put in for are both federal. So until they release it, we probably won't see that.
Okay. But do you think that the grant for the 500,000 from the state is enough to keep?
It'll keep us busy for a while,
Okay.
a couple years. Unless we go crazy, but I don't see us doing that.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And thank you for putting that together.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of, the public asking questions about it because they're seeing it on a national level and now a state level. And also just to get everybody on board on the same page. So thank you for getting that all together.
Yep. Any public comments?
I don't have any.
None?
Unrelated to this meeting, there was a few weeks ago, the sheriff was in here, I think, for grant money for employment, hiring more deputies in the sheriff's department. And she said she was advertising on the state, the state website, but come to find out she had misspoke or an oversight on one of the 4 administrators. They were only advertising in one place for deputies. So my question is, was the purpose of advertising for additional deputies in that one site, was that for DEI employees? And how many DEI employees has the sheriff hired?
I wouldn't have an answer to that. One of the things is I know we requested that we put all of our hires through the Idaho Department of Labor, and they're starting to go through Sydney now. She's going to be the.
But she claimed that she had posted on those sites, but come to find out she didn't.
Yeah, but I think they're posted now. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. You'd have to ask that to be a question for her because we don't get into employment. We don't oversee the employment on the sheriff or any other elected official. We don't have anything to do with that. We can't hire, fire, or persuade them to hire anybody. It's just that's their department. We're kind of hands off on that.
I would say I've never heard DEI mentioned in any discussion.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it brought up in any jobs with Shoshone County.
Just it came up again this week, and so I decided I want to get some answers if I can.
All right. Any questions? No? We all good?
I'm good.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.